Hello, everybody, and welcome to another travel blog. And today I'm going to speak about my experience in Indonesia, where I have stayed for around 2 weeks, where I've started on the West Sumatra, a little town called Padang. And then I went down by a car with a car. And then from one point, I went to a city called Jambi and further south. And then I took a flight to Jakarta, where I stayed for a week. So in total, I was in Indonesia for 2 weeks. Disclaimer, I haven't been to Bali because it was a bit far away. I don't have too much time and I do not like touristy places that much. So I prefer local spots of Indonesia. And in the next 5 to 10 minutes, I'm going to share my experiences, my insights, and my suggestions for Indonesia. I'm not going to go into details like what place I booked, blah, 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 but I'm going to speak more generally. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comment section, because your questions or your comments would also help me to prepare for the next video a bit more thoroughly. So here we go. And let me turn on my notes as well. There we are. So I flew to Indonesia from Kuala Lumpur. And Malaysia and Kuala Lumpur is quite developed, so everything was too easy. And Indonesia doesn't have that much of a great infrastructure. So it was a bit more difficult to travel in Indonesia. But of course, it had its ups and downs. One of the things that surprised me in Indonesia was like the moment I arrived, and I arrived to a small town. So I can understand, because almost everybody else were either Malaysian or Indonesian, because we took a flight from Malaysia. I was the only quote unquote white guy. So when I was in the customs, when I was in the passport check, even though I got my e-visa before, because you have to pay around $30, most of the countries have to do that, to get an e-visa. You can get it in the airport as well, but I always prefer to get an e-visa, so I don't wait in the line to get a visa and get stamped in the airport. That's like plus 1 hour. But when I was in the passport control, the guy questioned me like for 5 to 10 minutes, and that's very long for what I'm used to, because usually they're like, hello, welcome, they don't even ask something, they stamp it. Or because I have so many stamps in my passport, and I'm a Turkish passport holder, which is a decent passport. It's not the best, but it is pretty okay. But in Indonesia, like the guy asked me questions like 5 to 10 minutes. He was like, what is the reason you came here? What do you do? And there was also like one number missing in my e-visa application, but he helped me out and he didn't give me a hard time. It was like, do you come here for tourism or work? I was like, no, I'm coming here. I mean, you see my stamps. I'm here. I'm traveling to every country, so obviously I'm traveling. So it was like, what do you do? I'm an English teacher. Usually I say English teacher. I'm not just an English teacher, but it's easier to say I'm an English teacher, but I do teach English. It's like, are you going to do your work here? No, no. So it was like a lot of questions. So I was like, man, I'm not moving to Indonesia. I'm not going to be here illegally. So, but I understand probably they're doing their jobs. But yeah, that took a while. So, and for such a small airport. So that was the first experience. Wasn't that great, but he was still polite, but it took like 5 to 10 minutes. And then I was in this very small town, so I took a train to the city center and I booked a hotel. Indonesia is very cheap in general, so the private room I booked was around like $7 to $8. Hostels are around $3 to $4, especially smaller towns like in Padang, where I was. I went to a decent restaurant, like I got a full plate of fish and rice next to it. It costed between $1 to $2. So if I wanted like a shake next to it, that was like $3. I didn't pay more than $3. Only in Jakarta, it was a little more expensive, which is understandable, but the small towns are extremely cheap. But probably Bali, that's not the case in Bali, probably and I know from the people who have been there. But again, I have not been to Bali. One of the things that I was surprised about Indonesia were like, because it's a touristy country, but I guess apart from Bali, the rest of the country isn't that touristy. But from Padang, even till Jakarta, people were astounded to see a Western tourist, like a white guy. Whenever I walked, like people called me out, people were like, hey, where are you from? Blah, 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 blah. And in Indonesian, in the language, they call you bule, which is like a foreigner, but they mostly refer to white people. So when I walked like in a town or a street, especially children, they start shouting like bule, bule. But always, not almost always that was positive. Like nobody called me out, nobody tried to scam me, nobody was aggressive, nobody was like, what are you doing here? They were like, hey, there's a foreigner. That is interesting. So they were all very nice and polite. But yeah, it was interesting. Like from the moment that I set foot up on Indonesia, people were seeing me. So, and I've seen a couple of tourists, but I haven't seen a lot. So probably they're not used to it and they do appreciate it. There was also an instance in Padang. They have really like a nice coastline, and The sunset is beautiful there. So I was walking there, and everybody was Indonesian, and there were like more than 200 people. So I remember walking to the very end of the coast, and when I went back, everybody was looking at me like the white guy is there, and then they were asking me questions. They were like, "Come sit with us, come sit with us." But yeah, I mean, I'm used to attention also because of my job, but it was too much attention, like 200 people looking at you, like smiling, talking about you. But again, I only felt positive vibes, so I'm not complaining about this. I'm just pointing it out. And again, Indonesia is an extremely cheap country, especially those small towns, super cheap. Like you could have a good day for $10 per day, even lower, but like $10, you would have good food, good accommodation. It's crazy. And it's extremely safe. I have never felt unsafe in Indonesia. Also in the big city, Jakarta. Jakarta is massive, but I have never felt unsafe. People were always helpful. People were always nice. And I felt always safe and comfortable in every part of Indonesia. Again, as I said, infrastructure is not great. So going from city to city in such a big country, it's a bit difficult. The first ride I had was from Padang to a small village, which is 2 hours. But from that small village to another city called Jambi, it took like 10 hours. So it was exhausting. Not because the distances are long, but the roads are not great neither. So like the biggest highway is a narrow highway, like just 2 lanes. And then I had another trip as well, which was like 8 to 9 hours. So after that, it was exhausting. So afterwards, I decided to take the flight to Jakarta instead of taking the bus for another 10 hours. So the connections aren't great. They don't really have train connections as well. There are some buses, but it's not common as well. Mostly they have these shared taxis, so cars going back and forth, and it costs between $5 to $10. But there are a lot of flights, and there are a lot of cheap flight companies as well. So I guess that's a good option. But I prefer road travel, traveling by road as long as it's possible. Also to take my time and to see around. I enjoy it. But yeah, the last journey, I was like, okay, I'm going to fly. As you know, Indonesia is famous for its food. They have wonderful food. They have seafood, they have meat, they have vegetables, everything. Especially, I love these restaurants. I think they're called Padang restaurants. You see on the glass of the restaurant, there are like 30, 40 different plates. And every plate has different food. So you can enter and you can ask them, like, give me some of this, give me some of this, give me some of that, give me some of that. So it's like a little bit of noodles, a little bit of eggs, a little bit of chicken or meat or beef, whatever. And then you have a little bit of vegetables. You have this plate, which costs like $2 or $3. It was amazing. And I really enjoyed going to those places and choosing my own plate. I did enjoy that. So food, one of the best things that I had in Indonesia, but overall I had great experience. Food in Indonesia is great and extremely cheap. And even though Indonesia is a Muslim country, I mean, yes, they have prayers, they have a lot of women, especially in the smaller towns, almost every woman is covered. In Jakarta, you see some that are not covered, so it depends where. But yeah, mostly it is quite. I mean, the population is almost all Muslims. It's not like Malaysia where they also have like Buddhists, blah blah blah. Indonesia, no, almost all of them are Muslims, probably apart from some minorities. And but you don't feel it. Like when you walk, you don't feel it as a man. Because I heard of some girls. For example, I heard the story of a German girl who went to a hot spring, and people were looking at her because like they were in a disapproving way because she was entering the hot springs with her bikini. It's not illegal or something, but people were like, because women there, when they enter the pool or to the sea, they have this special cloth that covers every part of their body, so they don't wear bikinis almost never. So I guess if you're a girl, it's a bit different than if you're a guy. When you're a guy, it's way easier in most of the world because it's still a patriarchal society, obviously. And the English level in Indonesia was almost very good. Not everybody speaks in English, and especially in little towns, they don't. But almost everybody can communicate a little bit in English. It's not like they're not clueless about English, and especially in bigger places, they do speak good English. So it was also easy to have a conversation with people. But when I was sharing these taxis, like nobody in the car spoke English, so I had to use like Google Translate. But they're so friendly, and they try when they want to explain you something, they try to do it with their body languages. So I also enjoyed that. So this is my experience about Indonesia and my insights so far. I stayed there 2 weeks, and I enjoyed it a lot. I felt very safe. It was very cheap. It wasn't infrastructurally easy, but it was easy in general. There were a lot of options, and people were extremely interested at a Western tourist. And I'll definitely go there again, go back to Indonesia again, because it's a big country and I kind of missed the east part. So I want to discover that part as well. And one other thing that I can say, if you go to Jakarta, keep in mind that it's huge. Even going from one part of the city to the other, it takes like 2 hours because there's a lot of traffic. The infrastructure isn't great. So keep that in mind. Like Jakarta is like a country on its own. It's not like a city. So you might be stuck in one place if you don't want to go around the whole day in Jakarta as well. But definitely recommend it. Lovely country, lovely people. And thank you. If you have any questions, any comments, feel free to share. I make these videos quite like informal and without any editing intentionally, because I want to feel like we're having I want you guys to feel like we're having a conversation. But if you have any recommendations or any suggestions or any questions about the content, about the way I do this, because I do this as a hobby, I'm not planning to get millions of followers and earn money from it. I have my own job. But yeah, if you have any recommendations, please feel free to share. It was great to share my experiences with you, and I'll keep doing that. If you would like to follow me and what I do, you can follow me on Instagram by my name and surname, Imrek. And yeah, feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Bye and see you.